Welcome back. I'm about to introduce you to really a fascinating person from our region. His name, Sampson Davis, and he was born and raised in Newark, one of New Jersey's poorest cities, as you know, and one of its most violent. The fifth of 6 children, he grew up in cramped living quarters with an absentee father. Now, he could have become a statistic like so many, but instead, he became, especially for his home city, a beacon of hope. He, along with 2 other friends, they vowed at a critical point in their lives as teenagers to become doctors, and they followed through on that vow. Now, in Dr. Sampson Davis's latest book, Living and Dying in Brick City, he documents the American healthcare crisis from the front lines, the emergency room of an inner city hospital. In fact, a hospital that he was born in. Now, he is a story of perseverance in the toughest of circumstances, and I spoke with Dr. Davis earlier this week. Your name might be familiar to a lot of our viewers. About 10 years ago, if anybody remembers the book, The Pact, it was also authored by our guest. And in it, you talk about how you and 2 childhood friends in inner city Newark made a pledge in high school that you guys were going to become doctors, and you all did. When you guys made that pact, did you really think down deep that you were going to make it?
I think there was a part in me that felt like we were going to make it, but the odds were stacked against us. I mean, coming from the inner city streets of Newark, New Jersey, no one pegged us as being able to make it. And along the way, there were moments of doubt, but we had each other. That was the secret ingredient of it all. To me, either I was going to make it or go back home, and going back home wasn't an option, so I had to make it.
Talk about you come back and you see a name on the wall in the ER. And it was a name you grew up with, but unfortunately under that name you saw deceased. And I guess take us back to when you were 17 and a half and the importance of being 17 and a half and not 18 and an incident that obviously changed your life.
Yeah, in my new book I allude to being arrested at 17 and a half, and I stress 17 and a half because had I been 18 years old, I wouldn't be here. My situation would have been totally different. But at 17 and a half, I committed an armed robbery with a fellow neighborhood friend, and we were caught and pretty much taken to jail. I was given a second chance and a second chance at life, and was released with 2 years probation and went on to make this pact with my other 2 friends to become doctors. And the young man that I was with, he's continued down the road of crime, and I lost touch with him. And I went through the years of college, went through the years of medical school, and returned back home to practice emergency medicine. I was on trauma rounds one day, and I saw a name on the board, Don Moses, was what I referred to in the book, Living and Dying in Brick City. But right through his name, as you mentioned, was a slash and the words deceased written underneath. And I said, what are the possibilities that this is the same Don Moses that I grew up with? And so when the rounds were over, I sprinted down to the surgical intensive care unit, and his family was gathered around the room. And unfortunately, it was the same Don Moses. He was shot many times the night before and expired that same evening, and the family was gathered around the room mourning his loss. And it just sort of concrete and crystallized in my mind how close my life came to ending the same way had I not gone down the road of positivity and education.
You know, Doctor, we cover Newark on this program, and it really always falls into seemingly 2 different categories. One, the mayor and his political prospects, or 2, the violence and the never-ending violence. If you could, talk a little bit about the problems and why and what you see coming through the doors from both the gun violence and the violence, but also through epidemics. And if you could start there, from heart disease to diabetes to some of the things that, while national issues, are especially epidemics in inner city areas.
Yeah, unfortunately, in inner cities across the country, it appears as if every ailment the inner cities are #1 in suffering from. So heart disease, obesity, diabetes, high blood pressure, drug use, sexual transmitted disease. And a lot of that stems from just being in poverty. It's not a reflection of the individual as much as it is a reflection of the systemic conditions that they live in, that we are born into. And so when folks are dealing with how I'm going to pay my electricity bill, how I'm going to pay my mortgage, their diet takes 2nd or 3rd or 4th place even. The same with education. So my hope and my aspiration is to really put education and health on the front lines, and something that we can champion on, because before we can change some of the issues that plague our communities across the country, we first have to figure out a way that us as individuals can take ownership over them. And so when I look at a person coming in and they're 9 years old and a pediatric child and they're well over 100 pounds and they're eating a bag of chips on a stretcher and they're there for ankle pain, I'm like, you know, it's not the ankle pain issue, it's the fact that the diet and the addressing the obesity is the major issue that somewhat surface and is prevalent in our communities across this country.
Doctor, you also talk in the book about access to care, and in the news recently, as people followed, there has been shuttering of hospitals in New Jersey and the possibility of more doors closing as well. Even with all the talk of health care and affordability that's going to come now with the new policies, put a face on this for us about how access is a major issue, especially in inner cities, to health care.
Well, can you imagine waiting to be seen by a doctor for 8 hours, spending the night in the emergency department waiting to be seen by a physician? I mean, this is what's happening in our communities because it's a situation is similar to Newark. We've lost over 5 hospitals over the last decade. Meanwhile, the population hasn't changed. If anything, has increased. People are waiting hours and hours to be seen in the emergency department. They use the emergency department as access to primary care because there's no other option. That's the only option that they have. So they visit the ER for everything as serious and life-threatening as heart attacks, gunshot wounds, strokes, but things as simple as your common cold, your seasonal allergies, or your finger pain.
Can you explain why the cycle of violence in Newark just seems to be never-ending?
The issue often stems from systemic poverty. Regardless of your background, if you're put in a situation where you have to survive by any means necessary, then you're going to do what it takes. And if oftentimes that includes crime, that's something that's taught. That's something that's not inherited. It's something you're not born with this sort of level of rage and attitude in which you're going to go out and commit crime. But your situation depicts what happens. So you have people who are struggling to pay their bills, people who are starving, people who don't have food on the table. Then you look at the complexity of the family structure. Oftentimes, such as myself, you grew up in a single-parent home. There's not dad in the house. There's no one there to teach you how to tie a tie, teach you how to act professionally or walk appropriately. So then you turn to the streets, and then the streets swallow you, and people are looking for love, and they turn to the streets and find it in the wrong places. So this sort of situation that exists that plagues the inner city is a situation that keeps cycling over and over again. And before we can put an end to it, we have to help our folks in these communities so that they can become better. And when they become better, then the system and the city can start to heal, and they heal from the inside out. We can't expect situations in which people from the outside come in and help. I mean, that's always needed and that's always welcome, but we have to sort of teach and help the folks from the inside to heal. And by you healing from the inside out, then you start to see change, you start to see effectiveness that continues on from generation to generation.
Finally, Doctor, when you went away and you got your medical degree and your medical career took off, you had your choice of hospitals to go to. And usually when people leave a tough inner city hood, they don't want to go back. They talk about getting out. Why at the end of the day did you go back, and have you had any regrets since you have?
Well, I'll start with the last one. I've had 0 regrets. I mean, I think Newark has given me as much as I've given it. Coming back home was a natural fit for me, and to return to the same hospital that I was born at, Beth Israel in Newark, to practice emergency medicine, it just made all the sense to me and gave me and continued to give me the inspiration. And I think far too often people from blighted communities, once they succeed, they leave and they forget. And if we all keep leaving and if we all keep forgetting, then who's going to take care of the people left behind? It's great in life to be successful, but a better feeling is when you give back. When you learn how to give back and you feel the joy in doing so and changing a human life, there's not too many things else that compare.
We're going to wrap things up right after this.